This is going to be one of the few times I'm short on words. Kevin OBrien, we're very fortunate here in Cleveland. I've lived all over the country and have had a taste of the media, the printed media, from the West Coast to the East Coast and North and South, and I feel it's a wonder that here in Northeast Ohio we have a deputy editorial writer who is he's really smart, okay? Not just because I agree with most of what he says, but Kevin has a way of explaining things, bringing up matters that maybe you didn't think of before, but he has also, as I say, a way of explaining things from a position that I don't think the rest of the people in Cleveland and Cuyahoga County agree with. So it's a wonder that Kevin is still writing and writing as well as he is, and we're very privileged to have with us today Kevin OBrien. Thank you.
Thank you. Sometimes I think it's lucky that I'm just walking around, much less writing, but yeah, because a lot of people do disagree with me, and that's all right. I don't look as sharp as I do in my picture this morning because I got up this morning and I thought, it's really early, it's Saturday, it's really hot lately, so I'm not going to put on the tie and the coat. I'm just going to show up as me and see how it goes. So, thank you for bearing with my pedestrian appearance today, because it's all I got. I'm more comfortable than I would have been, believe me. And I see no ties out here, right? I think the goal is to not be underdressed, less well-dressed than the best-dressed person there if you're going to speak. So I pulled it off. Well, no, I didn't, because he's got a jacket on. But he also has his NRA hat on, which I think counterbalances it a bit. But you're going to talk too, right? Well, good. See, he had to be somewhat dapper, and he is. We can go right through. First of all, I'm too lazy to write a speech, and I'm sure I told you that the last time I was out here. It's still true, okay? So that's why we build this as a discussion, and we're going to get to discussion in just a second. What I try to do when I do this is formulate something that I don't want to leave unsaid, and say that at the beginning, in case we don't ever get to it in the discussion. Some things on your agenda I thought they provoked me to some opening thoughts. One thing was the Declaration of Independence, okay? We just celebrated the Independence Day on the 4th of July. I think a group like this is more in touch with what that means than probably most Americans are. You, because of your reverence, and I think that's a fair word, for the Constitution and the Declaration, the founding documents of the country, and the rules that we've made to live by. We're not doing a great job of that right now in upper echelons of government. Are important to you, and you understand them, you've studied them, you understand the meaning, you understand the point that we made by doing what we did and writing what we wrote. So that's great. It makes it easy to talk to a group of people like this because we're speaking the same language. We share a vocabulary that allows us to, we can go right off and get in the weeds. We don't have to do the big explanations. We're already there. So I hope that's where our discussion will carry us today as we go through the different events. Because the thing that I want to make sure that I say this morning is about principle. We need to do what Thomas Jefferson did in the Declaration of Independence. We need to lay out why we think the way we do about the different issues that are going on in our society today. As he put it in a letter to a colleague at the time, we need to place before mankind the common sense of the subject in terms that everybody can understand. And in fact, as Jefferson put it, command their assent. It's really hard to command anybody's assent these days because we don't all speak the same language. A group like this that is really in touch with the founding documents of the country is operating on a much higher intellectual plane than your average run-of-the-mill American who's, you know, okay, I understand it. Got a day-to-day life to live, a job to do, a family to take care of, a life to manage. Okay, I get all that. Those of us who take a little extra time, though, to put some thought into what we're doing and the why of what we're doing or what we believe, I think are in a leadership position. So I think it's great that people are watching the videos that you take here and you know, they're listening to people who have thought things through, who have tackled a subject and put some brain power into it and tried to come up with solutions that fit, and here's the key word, principle. Our job, my job in the paper, every time I write, your job every time you talk to somebody, because you're frankly better educated on principle than they are in most cases, is to lay out your principles in clear, unmistakable terms, and then live them out in how you operate in the political arena. And we're all political actors, whether we like it or not. You can choose to go big with that, or you can choose to go very small and very underneath the radar with that. Either way, you are a political actor. You are somehow a force in the body politic. So don't abdicate the principle that you live by. Your job is to keep thinking about what you believe and why you believe it. Connect it back to some historical precedent or some great idea that somebody had, because there are a lot of great ideas to tag onto out there, and then find a way to articulate that to other people in a convincing, persuasive way. Not the easiest thing to do, but not impossible. Everybody can do it. I mean it. Everybody can do it. And a group like this can help you hone those principles and improve your arguments and improve your mind, for that matter, and send you out into the body politic a little better armed than you were the month before the meeting, you know, the month before you had that last meeting. So please do that for each other. But it's much easier to operate on the level of principle than it is to argue everything ad hoc, everything case by case, all right? Everything that happens is a potential vehicle for arguing from principle, but first you have to plug that event into the template of your principles and see where you stand, okay? If you work it the other way, you're going to wind up either just angry, which we see lots of, and thereby inarticulate, or you're going to end up just arguing one event at a time with people. And that usually is a way to not endear yourself to people. I know, because I do it every week, okay? I'm sort of stuck in that position, but when I write, I'm trying to get to principle, and I'm trying to start from principle when I'm thinking about what it is that I feel about a situation. I've got to start with principle. I've got to find the template. Do you remember when, what was her, I can't think of her name now. There was a woman who was on the radio, one of you is going to remember it, some time ago in the Cleveland market, it may have been 10 years ago by now, who people would call in with their dilemmas, and she would, you know, I'd be listening and I'm thinking, whoa, how's she going to get out of this one? And she would come up with the right advice every time. And I realized as I was listening to her, which I actually infrequently did, but if she just happened to be on, that what she was doing was plugging everything that happened into a template that she already had worked out. There were certain levels of moral or political belief that she went through, and she saw how the event fit the template, she had the answer. She had an answer that worked for her and that she could be persuasive with. That's what you guys need to do. That's what we all need to do. We need to come up with an answer that fits beliefs that are basic, bedrock things that we have come to know because we accept them as truth, okay? They could be biblical truth, it could be political precedent truth, it could be legal truth. We're running roughshod over legal truths in the last couple of years. You know, the laws suddenly don't mean what the words say. You know, we're changing the meaning of words in order to get to outcomes that we want. It's the opposite of standing for principle. Or it's a way to get to some principles that we really shouldn't be allowing ourselves to get to because of the way that our government and our society were set up. We're shortcutting some things. And to do it, we have to ignore the founding principles of the country. Argue against that every day. Another thing that I want to not leave unsaid is groups like this get defined by people who have no idea who you are, what you're doing, and they don't care much what you're doing. They just want to defeat you and shut you up. I know a lot about that too. I feel that constantly. You know, if you guys read the Plain Dealer or you see the letters to the editor, you know, I come in for a lot of criticism. And that's fine, no problem. I get to pick the letters too. So if you see something that's critical of me, I picked it out, I edited it to make the person look as articulate as possible, because fair is fair. And I wrote the headline, all right? So those three elements, I am intimately involved with my critics, and I'm perfectly happy with that situation. You don't shut people up, and you don't allow yourself to be shut up, okay? You can fight against the tendency of people who oppose you to define you by your actions in the community. Free unsolicited advice that you don't have to follow here, but you guys have some money in the bank account. You could use that to further some purely political cause. That would certainly be a legitimate use of the money. You could also do something that defines your group somehow in the community as a value to the community, rather than just a bunch of people who want to meet on Saturday morning once a month and talk about politics. You could do something that's tangibly good for the community and that short circuits the argument that you are somehow haters or, you know, evil people or something, because people want to make your opponents, people who are politically on the other side of questions from you, want to make you bad people, because then nobody has to think about what you say anymore. Once you're defined as bad people, we don't have to worry about them anymore. They have nothing of value to say. We can just ignore them. Well, there are ways to counteract that by being a force for good in the community, being a force for obvious good by doing things nobody can argue with in your community. And you got a couple of grand in your checking account, I would urge you to think about ways that you can use that, like you said, we don't all support the same candidates, we come from a little different compass point maybe on the political side. There are things that are just purely positive goods that could be done for Amherst or, you know, for this part of Lorain County that would, let's call it what it is, make you look good to your neighbors. That would establish some credibility beyond politics that gets to the level of principle, okay? Our principle here, our guiding principle here would be, we do good things for our community. And we do things ourselves. We take that old Alexis de Tocqueville model of small communities or small groups, self-starters, who go out and just see things that need to be done and do them. Don't wait around for the government to come in and take over and make a huge, expensive, probably unworkable deal out of something that should be simple. You see the problem? You solve the problem. You see the houses that need paint jobs? You go in there yourself. You don't wait for HUD to show up. You go in there, you paint the damn house. How hard is that? So, do something with the money that endears you to your community and gives the lie to the people that say you're mean or you're nasty folks, because we know better than that. There's nothing that bothers me more than somebody who accuses me or accuses you of being something that we all know that we're not. And it's totally out of political motivation. So I'm just telling you, my advice, there are ways to get around that have nothing to do with politics. And brainstorm a little bit about things that you can do. You know your community better than anybody else. Things that you could do here that work for everybody and that make you heroes rather than villains. Okay, because people want to cast you as villains. Work against that. That's all I got. All right, those are the things that I wanted to be sure to say. And we build this as a discussion, and seminars are always more interesting than lectures. So I want to hear from you, and there is no question that's out of bounds. If I don't know it, I'll make up an answer. If I don't want to talk about it, I'll bob and weave. If I like the question, I'll tear right into it. But I win because I'm the speaker. Who's got something? Who wants to talk about what? Yes.
Yes, Mr. O'Brien, I do have a question. Are you a resident of Lorraine County, or do you reside in Chicago?
I'm going to be, because I've got the mic and you want it on tape, I'm going to repeat the questions. Is that what you were going to say? All right, good. The question is, am I a resident of Lorraine County? No, I'm not. I'm right across the border in North Olmsted. I spend a bit of time in Lorraine County because I referee soccer, so I'm over here a lot.
You shop to get 40%, the 1%
Oh, you know, I never think of that, but I probably should. Yeah.
That's okay. Our commissioners don't think about that either.
No, I'm sure they don't.
Yes, in fact, you can come in here for your school shopping and save
Right.
money.
Well, you know, what government agency ever wanted to do a volume business rather than increase the cash flow immediately? Yes.
Any special criteria do you use for choosing? You have 3 letters and you need to have one of them. Is it related to current events or maybe some articles you wrote, or just an opposite opinion from everybody else, or is it a little bit of everything?
Okay, short version of the question, how do we pick letters to the editor when, you know, you've got letters that are sort of about the same thing or whatever? The process starts over on the Cleveland.com side because they are the content generators, and the plain dealer uses them as the primary source of content. We still have some plain dealer writers, of course, who cover some certain beats and, you know, do what writers do. But for the most part, the content comes from Cleveland.com. And in the case of editorials and letters to the editor, all of the content comes from Cleveland.com. We don't have anybody on our side that actually works through that stuff and sets it up. So the first level of the process is they pick letters that they want to post online. Then our computer system automatically picks up the things that they post and puts them where I can see them. Then I go in and I choose the ones that I think are the best, which is the short answer. That's the criteria, the ones that I think are the best, okay? But the thought process that I go through when I'm picking letters is it brief, okay? Because we want to get lots of letters in, and the longer they are, well, let's just put it this way, if it's long, I cut it, okay? And that's what editors do. And we, in the very fine print, somewhere in the section each day is a thing that says we edit letters for sense and brevity, basically. So if it doesn't make sense, I make it make sense, which sometimes requires a lot of work. And if it's not brief enough, I make it brief enough. And if it's long and it doesn't make sense, I just chuck it. It's not going to happen. Content-wise, I'm looking for things that haven't been said before. So if you're breaking new ground, you get preference. Your letter will run. I look for things that are contrary to what's been said before. So if you've got a minority opinion, you've actually got a better chance of getting your letter in once the sort of the groundswell of where most people are going has been established. Okay, good. I look for contrarians. Because I am one myself, and we got to hang together, we contrarians, because it's impossible for us to hang together. Somebody didn't get up too late this morning. Okay. And then I'm looking for timeliness or timeliness. It's got to be related to things that are going on now. I don't know if this is a function of when the people write or when Cleveland.com gets around to posting it, but sometimes we'll get letters that are related to maybe answering another letter that appeared 3 or 4 weeks before. That's iffy. That letter's got to be pretty good to make it in, because I look at that and I think, well, we kind of did that, and it's been a while. People aren't going to, if I'm only seeing this now and it's the first one, people aren't too jazzed up about this thing, so I'm not sure I want to run that. I might find something better. But it's very subjective. The whole letters process from beginning to end is very subjective about what gets picked. But those are kind of the general criteria, and they really slide. If I like something, I'll use it, is kind of the bottom line. Yeah.
Were you at all surprised at FBI Director Comey's statement and position?
Was I surprised at the FBI's decision not to recommend an indictment of Hillary Clinton? That's the case you're talking about, right? Yeah.
Sorry,
I was joking at your expense. Because nobody's talking about this, You really pulled that one out of the weeds. No, I was not at all surprised. I have included in columns about the presidential race, jokingly, pretty frequently, the little, unless she gets indicted, parenthetical statement, whenever I'm talking about Hillary Clinton for the last, since this has been going on. I never in this world thought that they were going to indict her, and I wrote about it I wrote about the reason why this week. She's above the law. And she's not the only one. We are now in a situation where we have a political class and some members of just what I'd call the celebrity class who are above the law. They are literally too big to indict, too big to prosecute. She's certainly one of those people. So no, I was not in the least surprised. I never thought that she was going to get indicted. I don't think, even if she hadn't been running for president, I don't think she would have been indicted, because what prosecutor, when Comey said no reasonable prosecutor would indict her, he was absolutely right, but it didn't have anything to do with law, all right? No reasonable prosecutor is going to indict a Clinton, because why would you waste your time? I mean, they had Bill Clinton dead to rights. Yeah. They impeached him. The Senate looked at it and said, nah, including a fair number of Senate Republicans, all right? It's not going to happen. They are above the law. So why would you bother? And then knowing that, why would Comey say, well, yeah, you ought to indict her? Because I felt bad for him. He was screwed either way. If he said, yeah, you should indict her, and it doesn't happen, and it wouldn't have happened, then where does he stand? I mean, that diminishes his official stature when that happens. Most people in public life aren't going to do that, knowing what's coming. If he says don't indict her, and it doesn't happen, it's the thing that everybody expected. I don't think anybody in their right mind thought that she was going to get indicted. We all know she's guilty of sin. All you have to do is read that statute, and you know that Comey's dodge about this not intentional business is nowhere in the law. There is an entire section of the espionage law that is dedicated to gross negligence. And there is a legal meaning, even today, when we're changing the meaning of words, to gross negligence. And what he described, especially when he testified before the House committee, was gross negligence. All right? And what's his name from South Carolina? Trey Gowdy. Walked him right through it. Did she do this? No. Did she do that? No. And pointed out every lie, well, not every lie, he stopped because he said he had a plane to catch the next day. Walked him through every lie that, or the top 10 lies probably that she had told, trying to explain this stuff away. And then when Gowdy asked him, okay, well, this is allegedly exculpatory evidence, falsely presented, what do you do with that as a prosecutor? And Comey said, well, you use it in a prosecution. You use it as evidence for conviction. Because he couldn't say anything else. There is a legal method to that everybody understands. Certainly the FBI director understands it. And at that point, he had exposed himself as a political actor. But we knew he was a political actor, so anybody who was surprised by that hasn't been paying attention. But you got to feel, or at least I do, a little bit bad for Comey. He was in a very difficult position. He was placed in a political vice, and he had to jump one way or the other. Nothing he said was going to make any difference. So I think what he did, maybe this is going too far to defend him, but I think if you put the best possible face on what he did, and I'm willing to do that, was he said, I'm not recommending that she be indicted. However, these are all things that you should know. Because he didn't have to hold that press conference, and he didn't have to do it the way he did, with the big build-up to the no indictment. If he had started with, I'm not recommending that she be indicted, he could have walked away from the microphone and that would have been it. Instead, he gave us chapter and verse on all of the things that she had told the American people that were not true. I think he made the best of a bad lot. I think he gave us a strong signal that we could not blithely vote for her for the highest office in the land because she had been completely, totally, and willfully irresponsible with national security. He laid that out there for us. Now, what we do with that is up to us. But he did his job as far as he could do it. And again, when he testified before the House, he was honest about the questions that were asked. In a situation where we all know that certain people are above the law, whether we like it or not, I'm not sure that that was a bad outcome entirely.
But if half the country, and I mean the other side, and half the brain, we are the ultimate deciders of the ballot box.
Right.
And there's no appeal from that.
Right.
That can't get tied up in a federal court for years.
Right.
That November day, 4 months from now, will be.
Right. The question wasn't a question, it was a statement. If half the country that supports her had half a brain, we wouldn't have to worry about it. There's no way she would win. It's certainly damaged her prospects, I think. I don't know if it's damaged them enough. And I don't know that in the race that we have before us right now between the two major parties, if she can be damaged enough to keep her out of the White House. Because no matter what, the race that we're in right now is a referendum on Donald Trump. If any other Republican had been the candidate, it would have been a referendum on Hillary Clinton. That is not the situation that we face. Hand in the back, yeah.
In your opinion, do you think it would be worth the money spent with the RNC to make a statement, a recorded commercial, whatever else, not necessarily pro-Trump or Republican, but just stating facts in this unindicted case by showing video clips of her testimony versus what Comey came up with? Go back and forth. It's been suggested on national media that this would be the best use of previously recorded material. And as you just said, people with half a brain would have to make up their own mind. I'd like them to have more than half a brain, but more than half.
Should the RNC make a commercial or a series maybe of commercials that lay out Hillary Clinton's lies next to, immediately answered by Comey's testimony? Sure. I mean, I'm not a political consultant for a reason. I don't know stuff about how best to market a candidate or a party. I know what appeals to me. That sounds to me like a really good idea. And I've got to tell you, I didn't see it, but as I was listening to Gowdy and Comey go back and forth, I was thinking Gowdy is building an attack ad right here before our very eyes, if somebody just wants to avail themselves of it. And I think even if the RNC doesn't do it, somebody will, because it's just so obvious. I mean, it's just, talk about easy pickings, It's right there if you want to grab it, and they should grab it. In the back.
In a larger context than just the fact that we know that she lied, we know that she has mishandled information, and you're saying that there are some people that are above the law. What does that really say about our democracy? What does that really say about our society when we know that certain people, no matter what they do, how wrongdoing or illegal they are, they can be prosecuted? Now, I'll take it one step further. In that hearing, it was said that the Congress would refer to the FBI request for perjury. If it's determined to be perjury, what do you think, how Comey can get out of that?
The question was, what was the first part? Oh, what does it say about our society that some people are above the law?
He said perjury would be a felony.
Okay, and then as far as the perjury charge, we're talking about Comey, or we're talking, who's the subject of the charge?
Well, it was said that they would refer, Shago said they referred to the FBI a request for them to determine whether she lied before Congress.
Okay.
He said that would be a felony if that was true.
Right.
So how does he get out of that?
Oh, I don't think he gets out of it all, and I don't think that he would, I don't think he would even hesitate to agree, because it's going to be Congress's problem, not his. If they...
He's going to be determining whether it's lawful or not. It's actually going to the FBI.
Right.
They will make the determination.
Well, you could do it that way. I'm not sure how effective that is I'm not sure how effective that is if you did that. I think it would, boy, I hesitate to say this, but I think it would be more effective if you actually did it through Congress.
Just looking at what was said at the end.
Right. Well, they can do what they want. I don't think it's a bad idea. I don't know that I would expect much from the FBI at this point. You don't need the FBI to investigate perjury. Everybody's testimony is on the record here. And I think you can, I think if you launched that investigation, there would be all kinds of reasons to not get it done before the election, and they wouldn't. And I kind of don't blame them, because I think what we saw from Comey, I can't remember now where I read this. It might have been one of the National Review guys. It might have been Jim Garrity, who wrote that, I want to get this right, that, lost my train of thought. That'll look good on the tape.
We'll edit you out.
Yeah, thanks, good, yeah, good. Drop this entire section and just go back to the beginning. We'll start over. I don't think that going the perjury route through the FBI makes sense. Putting it in an adversarial, the witnesses, Hillary Clinton, the witness, is right here telling us that she didn't lie, and thereby committing perjury again, because that's what would happen, is more effective as a presentation to Americans than an FBI investigation that's not going to get done before the election would be. Going back to the first part of the question, what does it say about our society that some people are above the law? I'll go back to principle. We have strayed so far from the guidelines, not the guidelines, the rules of the Constitution, that we're almost in an anything goes situation. Since 1916, we have been willfully departing from a document that was put together by the most talented group of people ever produced in a single generation on the political side. We had the best brain power that this planet has ever seen in politics work out this document. Most of it was James Madison, but a lot of people had a hand in what was done, and they wouldn't have been there without the group that put together the Declaration of Independence, which we've also strayed from. What's that?
Several of whom served on both committees.
Yes, that's right. Several of whom had a hand in both documents, which makes sense because one is a framework to set out a legal framework of the other. So the Declaration was the principles, the Constitution was the action items. We have strayed so far from that in philosophy and practice that we have essentially negated most of what's in both of those documents. We have a government that's large, unwieldy, incredibly intrusive, nothing like what the founders, even on the Federalist, what became the Federalist Party side, envisioned. They wanted a stronger central government than the Democratic Republicans wanted. They wanted a more industrialized society as opposed to an agrarian society, had a different vision for what should be. We have gone so far from both of those competing views that we're lost right now. We're kind of deep in the woods. And we're not deciding things on principle. We're deciding things on a case-by-case basis according to political aims of whoever happens to have the loudest voice or the most votes in any given situation. It should not surprise any of us that our legal system has suffered from that, and that it has been politicized right up to the Supreme Court. As soon as you politicize the legal system, you lose your balance. You don't have a legal system that makes the country a government of laws rather than of men, which is what I wrote about on Friday. We don't have that anymore. We can get it back, but it's going to take a Herculean effort to get there, and it's going to take a much better educational system than we have had these last 100 years since the left seized control of the public schools and has worked its will in that arena to such an extent that Americans today don't have the slightest idea of what this country stands for, what its founding principles were, or why they came to be the founding principles of the United States. So we're in a mess. Groups like this, they're the way out of the mess. But we have to take the knowledge that's in this room and take it outside in a way that's convincing and non-threatening to people who would prefer to just go with the flow, okay? And that's most Americans. Most Americans don't particularly like politics. They don't want to get mixed up in it. They don't want to think about the bad side of it. They want to vote every 2 or 4 years and make it go away. You have to find a way to reach those people. It's why I write every week. It's why you guys meet every month. Now we got to get to the engagement part where we shore up the education that never happened in the public school system and get people to understand why we are the country that we are supposed to be, and how we need to get back to this idea that no one is above the law. No one's too big to indict. It's going to take a lot of elbow grease, but what other choice do we have unless we want to continue to live that way? I don't think anybody in here wants to continue to live that way. I certainly don't.
Thank you very much, sir, for this presentation. It has been the most effective, and you were very succinct. The first 10 minutes were beautiful.
Thanks.
You brought up the dichotomy of the United States Constitution, our basic foundation, and then you went over to, I would call, the Orwellian end of changing in meanings of words. And I think you concluded that if we get into the latter, it's such a miasma, it's such a pit, you can't tell good from bad or otherwise. Now, I might be a little critical here, because I don't read all your columns.
Well, there's your first mistake.
I tried to check this morning, but you had online for it.
All right.
But when you mentioned National Review, it's still not the National Review that used to be. But,
Right.
But I threw that to the side.
Yeah.
I want to get back to the dichotomy. I have not seen among conservative writing the fact that we violated Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution. You know what that is.
Help me out. Oh, okay.
The war.
Right.
We've been in a lousy war, undeclared war since 1941. Just because we went into Korea and that was a police action doesn't make it nor Vietnam. And I have not, again, I haven't read you, I have not seen you advocate for that principle. We go, and the Republicans go and say, look at that Obama, he's violated the Constitution. If you violated yourself, what do you expect the second-hand guy to do?
Right.
Now, the other thing was, Comey might come in here, the Patriot Act. Have you criticized the Patriot Act? That is the biggest assault on the Fourth and Fifth Amendment. A cop can come and take you away and you disappear. It's rendition. You'll end up in Gitmo or in Poland in one of their jails.
Well, they're letting everybody out of Gitmo, so you wouldn't be there long, apparently.
Well, but you see, you've got to get back, even you.
Right.
Are you familiar with the story about Comey when the Attorney General Ashcroft was sick? About this Comey guy that you're talking about now?
Oh, yeah, because he was an assistant.
Yeah, right.
He was a deputy attorney general at the time. Yeah. Right.
To the people that he's not a complete bad guy.
Right.
So we've got to get back to principles. You all should be questioning about what is this war. The president is in Poland now, expanding NATO and saying that we're going to keep more troops in Afghanistan. And soliciting money from the NATO, so $5 million annually so they can have 300,000 guys in Afghanistan. We don't even know why we are in Afghanistan. So we get back to the principle. So please emphasize some of those things, the assaults against our foundation and against our liberties.
All right, the point made is a fair one, and it is not one that I have what criticism that I have made of the Patriot Act and the war powers ignoring the congressional prerogative to declare war and then going and fighting wars anyway has been indirect at best. I have criticized aspects of the Patriot Act. I did not criticize the entire thing. I certainly have criticized the formation of the Department of Homeland Security, which has become a very inefficient, very expensive boondoggle that doesn't do a very good job. Not because the people in it are not dedicated to doing a good job, but because when you build a bureaucracy of that size and that scope, it cannot do a good job. It just can't be done. So I have pointed out sort of individual things that I thought were mistakes made. As far as the war thing, relying on Congress to declare war in all circumstances, what I'd say about that is this. Your point is a good one, and it speaks to something, a principle, we'll get back to principle, that we have to keep in mind, and that is that we may have to live with political outcomes we don't particularly like because of principle. We might want to have a very highly responsive military that can go someplace on an order in a heartbeat which we pretty much have. You know, we have forces that can respond very rapidly to just about anywhere in the world within 48, 72 hours, somewhere in there. Not huge forces, but nimble forces that pack a pretty good punch. Congress doesn't do anything in 48 or 72 hours. 48 or 72 months? Yeah. There's a possibility. No, you can't be sure. And people will argue with some justice that the world today moves at a pace that makes the congressional war power obsolete. Okay, fair argument. You can defend it, you can attack it. But if you're not going to follow what's in the Constitution, if you don't want to, then amend it, all right? If you're going to do something, if you want to change the way we do things, go through the process and amend the Constitution, because there's, you know, if something's not working, we have a mechanism for making changes. We have it all laid out right there in the rule book. If you want to change it, change it. But don't shortcut it. You're right. I mean, there's no question that you're right.
Let me tell you the consequence. When the founders thought that war was a serious problem, right? And that we would go to it full, the nation would be behind it. Yep. By avoiding the war power and relying on a lousy revolution that the sons of bitches haven't changed yet since 01. By relying on that, it's something, we'll have the war on the side, but we're not really behind it. We're not committed. And that's why you don't have victory. You don't have our people talking about victory, because, hey, it's really not.
Right.
Okay, next question.
Next question. Oh, okay.
Well, in your explanations, you've pointed out that the whole thing is running crazy and the executive branch is out of control. I know that there's 3,000 new regulations passed every year. There's been 21,000 in Obama's term in office. So there's several of those that, you know, I've become aware of. HUD. There's the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Act.
Right.
We don't even know what's coming. They're going to shape our neighborhoods. And in order to do that, they'll need to be collecting information down to who's in your family and what color are they and you know, what's their economic status. And then they'll find that as a reason to rearrange the neighborhood. Do you have any comments?
I haven't written about that. This is the affirmative housing rule. It's, you know, it's nobody's law. It's a rule that HUD has made. It's wrong, of course. I would, again, on principle, go a lot farther in saying that it's wrong and what the remedy should be. The remedy should be that if you own property, you and you alone determine what's done with it. The remedy should be that if you own a business, to extend the question a little farther, that you should be able to refuse service to anybody who walks in your door. You can tell them to walk right back out again for any reason or for no reason. It's called freedom of association, and it's a constitutional right that is enumerated in the Bill of Rights. There are very good-hearted people who think that that's a bad way to go. I understand the argument. I can't accept the argument, though, because to accept the argument is to deny freedom to the people who are property owners. And property is one of the most important items of freedom in our founding documents. And we got to keep going back to those to make the argument that, yes, I understand, yes, a moral people would not have a problem with renting to whoever, with serving whoever in a business, especially if they're dealing with moral people. Okay, but you know what? We live in a fallen world and we are not perfect. And therefore, we have to have a principle that guides what we do in commerce or in our private lives. And the thing that we need to promote is freedom. Nobody has a right to a room in your house, or an apartment in your building, or a cake that you would bake, or a photo that you would shoot. Nobody, it's yours. Nobody else has any right to dictate what's done with it. That's the principle, that's the bedrock principle that we have to argue. There are other principles afoot that we have to work through in order to make our argument as strong as it should be. We have to recognize the good-heartedness of the people who are arguing with us, okay? They are not evil. They are trying to right what they see as a wrong. We have to take them back very carefully and very persuasively to first principles. And the first principle is the freedom of the property owner. That's where the argument needs to reside. If we can get them there, we have a chance at making them understand where we're coming from. That we don't just hate people out of hand, but that we want people to be free to use their resources as they see fit. That's a challenge, but it's a challenge that we who are constitutionalists need to pick up every day and carry out there to the rest of the world and make them understand where we're coming from. It's very easy to dismiss us as people who are just mean, but we actually have reasons for what we're arguing, and the better we can articulate them, which means the better we understand them ourselves, the more headway we'll make with people who oppose us, and the more likely we are to make an argument that the world will look at and say, oh, all right, well, there is some sense in that. It's really hard to get there, but we've got to keep trying, because if you lose control of the first principles, if you get to the point where no one refers to them, then you lose all the arguments, and we can't really afford to do that. There's too much at stake. You have had a question forever. Okay.
It's immediate. So,
okay.
And actually education, because I want you to think about like the new 20-year-old staff that come on board. I mean, are they more hardcore progressiveness? Are they maybe more libertarian-minded? And how would you characterize the new younger staff, plain dealer or
how would I characterize the political or economic state or position of the younger people who work at the plain dealer? I don't have the slightest idea. I am probably at the point now where I know about a third of the people who work for the plain dealer in Cleveland.com. I work in an office at the press plant on Tiedemann and 480 with, I think, 37 other people, and we're the old timers. We're the ones that have been around forever, because most of my job is production. I choose what goes into the forum sections, and I help with the layout, and most of my job is sort of administrative / content choice. I write the column as a hobby that I spend a few hours on every week. I spend maybe 3 or 4 hours a week on the column and 36 or 37 hours doing other stuff all week long. And working with those 37 people, it limits my horizons a bit, you might say. So I can't answer the question with any authority whatsoever. I will say that I've got 5 kids who are all in that same generation. From the limited sample that I see, there's a much more libertarian instinct among that age cohort. They are, I think the thing that bodes well for conservatives / constitutionalists out of that age group is they really like things like Uber and Airbnb that most of us would think, do I want to take a chance on that? You know, we might be a little cautious. They are all in. They think this is great stuff. And the folks who are really tied into the regulatory state and what it does hate these things. And that puts them at odds with the generation that's just now coming on the scene as political actors. We should be very consciously not at odds with that. We should be promoting the living daylights out of that sort of thing, because It cuts out, it doesn't just cut out the middleman, it cuts out the government in a lot of cases. It cuts out the unions. It cuts out a lot of things that get in the way and raise prices unnecessarily and squelch innovation. We should be all about that, and that would be a great way for us to bridge the gap between us and what we're calling the millennials, in ways that don't just reflect age but also reflect outlook on the world. We should promote those things like crazy. We understand why you like this. Even if we don't use it, we understand why you like it. We think it's really good. Keep saying that. That message needs to be out there.
Kevin, we have one last question, and it's me.
Oh, well, she's pulling rank.
Sorry.
You are not above the law, though. Just, okay. And I would be happy to hang around afterward and talk to anybody who didn't get their question asked, so shoot.
Having to do with the first principle of property rights, how do you feel about boycotts? I, for one, right or I'm not sure if I'm wrong, right or wrong, but if I'm upset with the way a company is doing something, I won't spend my money there. Mm-hmm. And I've been told that, well, that's not fair. But I don't know. So what do you think?
What do I think about deciding not to spend your money at a company that you don't that is doing something you disagree with? Well, back to property rights. Whose money is it?
Mine.
It's yours. So it's yours to spend as you wish. If you want to use it to make a political statement, feel free to do so. Understand, though, that is seen as a negative comment in general, and that there may be consequences that flow from being seen as a person who is negative about a certain thing. Maybe it's worth doing in some cases, maybe in some cases it's not. That's a judgment the individual has to make. But denying somebody your money is just as legitimate as denying somebody who's out to get you, let's say, if you're the wedding cake baker or the wedding photographer, denying them your service. It's all of a piece. It's the same thing exactly.
I do feel guilty now and again when I do that.
I feel...
And again, it's a way to, it's wearing a t-shirt.
I feel like I can't keep up. and so I don't do the boycott thing much, at least. It's got to be a big deal for me to go to that effort, because A, I'm not going to tell anybody else. I'm just not going to spend my money there. So, and B, so many companies are into things that I disagree with. And the other thing is, why does everything have to be about politics? That's one more thing I'll leave you with. I'll make one more sweeping statement here before I get out of here. You know what? Politics and government are way too important in today's world. We need to diminish the size. We need to diminish the importance of it, too. We need to look at it and say, you know what? This doesn't have to be a political issue. If I want to go to Bob Evans, do I have to look up their abortion policy? Which I will tell you I have looked up, and they're on the wrong side of the issue for me. But you know what? The eggs are good. And if I don't go there, is it going to change anything? No. And if I whip up a bunch of people who, which is how I found out what their policy was, somebody else was trying to whip me up. If I do that, do I really gain anything? Do I make headway on the argument that matters, which is not whether Bob Evans supports abortion, it's whether the Supreme Court created a right out of whole cloth in 1973. That's the issue. Always back to first principles. The more you get back to first principles, the more intelligent your decisions are going to be, and the better you'll be able to articulate what you stand for. So, we wrapped it all up in a nice bow when we're done. Thank you for having me.